thanks for joining us. Today we're going to focus on poems on September 11, 2001, and poems on grief and transcendence. This was Bob Beitcher's idea. I will begin by saying a couple things about language and grief. Several years ago, I went to the downtown LA Central Library to hear the late W.S. Merwin read his poetry. He began by saying something which I've thought about for a long time, and I agree with what he said. Quote, I, along with many linguists, believe that the first utterance of language was in poetry, and it came out of grief, end of quote. Horace, 65 BCE to 8 BCE, in his The Art of Poetry, translated by David Ferry, wrote, quote, Homer first showed us how the verse should move that tells the deeds of kings and sorrows of war. Lines paired unequally, as spoken broken-hearted, perhaps were first a vehicle of grief, lamenting one who died, and after that became a vehicle of thanks for health restored after a votive offering. It's not entirely clear, the scholarly jury is out, concerning how the verse called Elegiac came into being, and who was the first poet who wrote it, and for what reason, end of quote. It's an honor and a pleasure to have Bob Beitcher, CEO and President MPTF, with us again today. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Harry. Always a pleasure to be here. So I'm going to start in a different direction than the one you started in, Harry, which I thought was fabulous. So I wanted to put the poetry we're going to read today, specifically some of it about 9/11 and other poems about grief and transcendence in a context. And for that, I'm going to talk for a moment about, I'm going a little far afield here, so forgive me, but Theodore Adorno, one of the great minds of the 20th century, a philosopher, sociologist, psychologist, musicologist, and composer. He was born in Germany in 1932. He realized that a Jewish professor in Germany probably was not a great occupation. So he left Germany, he moved to England, and finally wound up, as many German exiles did, living in the Pacific Palisades, along with Bertolt Brecht, Arnold Schoenberg, Thomas Mann. He returned to post-war Germany because he was committed to his country, and his purpose was to reconstitute German intellectual life. And he taught for many years at Frankfurt University. What he discovered when he returned to Germany, I think, was 1949, both at the university and in the cultural life of Frankfurt, was that people continued to live as if nothing had changed. They held on to the ideas of the true, the beautiful, and the good, despite the atrocities the country had just experienced. And this disturbed Adorno. He felt like they didn't integrate into their beings, that the culture they adored had been lost in the rubble or killed off in concentration camps. And he said something to the effect of that culture had become an alibi for the absence of political consciousness. And at the time he wrote, and this is why I'm getting to it, to write lyric poetry after Auschwitz is barbaric. And he went on to say, by turning suffering into images, harsh and uncompromising though they are, it wounds the shame we feel in the presence of victims. For these victims are used to create something, works of art, that are thrown to the consumption of a world which destroyed them. So basically, Adorno viewed poetry as a way of almost degrading the victims of these events by turning them into art. Of course, he was referring to the poetry of the Holocaust, but I think for some, his words and ideas resonate in connection with poetry about 9/11. So we have this we have this conflicting view between Adorno and Merwin. Merwin saying that poetry arises from grief, and maybe not conflicting, but Adorno saying that writing poetry about these kinds of events degrades them. May seem like an odd way to start a poetry reading about poems written by 9/11, but I think for us, it's always useful to hold competing thoughts in our heads at the same time. Poetry about 9/11 that moves us, that makes us think and feel and grieve and transcend grief, and the idea that turning 9/11 into poetry or art is doing injustice to 9/11's many victims. As we know, and we're going to share today, there are many beautiful poems written about 9/11, and those poems have helped the poets who wrote them and the readers like us who read them cope with the emotional and spiritual struggles of the event. In an essay, Remembering 9/11 Through Poetry, published 10 years ago, a gentleman by the name of John Lundberg reflected as a New Yorker that after 9/11, poetry began popping up all over New York. The day after 9/11, you could see it in windows, taped on lampposts. By 2002, just 1 year after 9/11, 25,000 poems had been written in response to 9/11 and been published on the website poems.com. 3 years later, there were over 50,000 poems. So the healing power of words, to your point, Harry, healing power of words, lines, stanzas, imagery, arranged in a particular order with a specific rhythm, we know can be very transformational. And I think that's where we go into the poetry today, right? So we have this very interesting start. Merwin talking about, words, first words being used to talk about grief, and Adorno questioning whether some forms of grief should be written about at all in poetry. So I want to start. Let me find my. The first two poems I want to read are poems that were written by poet laureates. One U.S. poet laureate, Billy Collins, and the other UK poet laureate, Andrew Motion. And they were written specifically for official ceremonies dedicating remembrance of 9/11. And the history of these poems is usually pretty bleak. I've read a bunch of these, and Robert Frost, I think, wrote a poem for JFK's inauguration. If you go back and read it, it's like, oh God, this is not among Robert Frost's best work. But I think these two are very fine poems and are worth us reading today. So this is Billy Collins, American Poet Laureate, 2001 to 2003. So he was the Poet Laureate at 9/11. He read this at a special joint session of Congress on September 6, 2002, held to remember the victims of the 9/11 attacks. And for many years, he said he wouldn't include this poem in any of his anthologies of Billy Collins poems because he refused to capitalize on a poem that he had written about 9/11. Many years later, he relented, and it is available in some collections of Billy Collins. One of the reasons I love Billy Collins, by the way, this is an aside before I read his poem, is he has a book called Poetry 180, and it is a turning back, and it's a poem for high school students, and it's 180 poems, one for each school day. And it was his way of encouraging teachers, English teachers in particular in high schools, to expose their students to one poem a day, which I think is just a brilliant idea. I hope there are some teachers out there who actually buy the book and do that for their students. The name of this poem is The Names Yesterday, I lay awake in the palm of the night. A soft rain stole in, unhelped by any breeze. And when I saw the silver glaze on the windows, I started with A, with Ackerman, as it happened. Then Baxter and Calabro, Davis and Eberling. Names falling into place as droplets fell through the dark. Names printed on the ceiling of the night. Names slipping around a watery bend. 26 willows on the banks of a stream. In the morning, I walked out barefoot among thousands of flowers, heavy with dew like the eyes of tears, and each had a name. Fiore, inscribed on a yellow petal. Then Gonzalez and Hahn, Ishikawa and Jenkins. Names written in the air and stitched into the cloth of the day. A name under a photograph taped to a mailbox. Monogram on a torn shirt. I see you spelled out on storefront windows and on the bright, unfurled awnings of the city. I say the syllables as I turn a corner. Kelly and Lee, Medina, Nardella, and O'Connor. When I peer into the woods, I see a thick tangle where letters are hidden, as in a puzzle concocted for children. Parker and Quigley in the twigs of an ash. Rizzo, Schubert, Torres, and Upton. Secrets in the boughs of an ancient maple. Names written in the pale sky. Names rising in the updraft amid buildings. Names silent in stone or cried out behind a door. Names blown over the earth and out to sea. In the evening, weakening light, the last swallows. A boy on a lake lifts his oars. A woman by a window puts a match to a candle, and the names are outlined on the rose clouds. Vanacore and Wallace. Let X stand if it can for the ones unfound. Then Young and Zeminski, the final jolt of Z. Names etched on the head of a pin. One name spanning a bridge, another undergoing a tunnel. A blue name needled into the skin. Names of citizens, workers, mothers and fathers, the bright-eyed daughter, the quick son. Alphabet of names in a green field. Names in the small tracks of birds. Names lifted from a hat or balanced on the tip of the tongue. Names wheeled into the dim warehouse of memory. So many names. There is barely room on the walls of the heart.
Very moving. That's, the one thing I like the way you set up, and I do believe those two positions are reconcilable. Adorno, is that how you pronounce it?
Adorno, yeah.
One, and this poem right here, Billy Collins, I've always loved his poetry, the clarity and the details and the naming. It's all, when somebody dies, maybe this is on a personal level and it doesn't rise to the large, thing that, Adorno was talking about, but it's always important to remember, remembrance. You go to a funeral and, they tell you to, remembrance is important. Remember, tell stories.
Yeah.
So, and also I loved about this poem, the details and the weaving that Billy Collins does. So thank you for that. That's great.
I agree with you, Harry. One of the things I love about this poem is the specificity of these names. And then this, in terms of remembering them in these very commonplace images of a day in a life, seeing them in raindrops, seeing them on the lake, seeing them in flowers. It's a very powerful way of remembering and connecting them with something beautiful and transcendent. So the second poem is a poem that the Poet Laureate of England at the time, Andrew Motion, read for a September 11 memorial service in Westminster Abbey to remember British victims of the New York attacks. And Harry was kind enough to send me this poem. The voices live, which are the voices lost. The voices live, which are the voices lost. We hear them and we answer, or we try. But words are nervous when you need them most and shatter, stop, or dully slide away. So everything they mean to summon up is always just too far, just out of reach, unless our memories give time to slip and learn the lessons that heart wisdoms teach. Of how in grief we find a way to keep the dead beside us as our time goes on, invisible and silent, but the deep foundations of ourselves, our cornerstone.
I love the way he grounds that and ends, our cornerstone.
Yes. Yeah.
And the resonance in this poem, what is it, 412 lines?
Yeah.
It's very symmetrical. And he's excellent poem and excellent choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And really about the struggle I think we all have to keep the memory alive, to keep the person that we've lost, or the people that we've lost in this case, alive in our hearts. We feel them slipping away. I know, Harry, you've had your own grief. It's this, and we've all had them. It's this slipping away and pulling back, slipping away and pulling back. But they are our cornerstone.
And also, years ago I said something. It was, I know, please forgive me, and to bring in another horror in front of what we're dealing with now, but ISIS, beheading people.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, one day I had a vision of somebody's head being cut up, rolling down the hill, and then out of the voice of that head came, "Nothing stops poetry." So, even in death, the voice keeps on going.
Yeah.
And so that's another way of poetry transcending death. And also, we're dealing with, war. In a way, this was an attack of war. And, we also found out that we were not protected by those oceans on each side of us.
Right.
We all are vulnerable. And so, that makes us somewhat equal to many other nations around the world who don't have that leisure of that vastness and that protection. And we are not protected, but that leads into, well done on those, Bob. I mean, I listened to you talk about these, and I don't want to be a prophet, but I would say to myself and to you that someday you may end up, when you retire, if you ever do, I hope not, to teach. You're just a marvelous thinker, and you're so articulate. But let me move into a couple of poems. One by Lucille Clifton. Lucille Clifton was 1936 born and died in 2010. And this is a poem from a part of a sequence of hers called September Suite. And this one is called Tuesday, 9/11/01. Thunder and lightning, and our world is another place. No day will ever be the same. No blood untouched. They know this storm in other wares. Israel, Ireland, Palestine. But God has blessed America, we sing. And God has blessed America to learn that no one is exempt. The world is one. All fear is one. All life, all death is one.
Yeah. Such a powerful poem, Harry.
She's great, Lucille Clifton. And now, Bob mentioned a couple of previous poet laureates, one in the U.S., one in England. And now I will read a poem by Joy Harjo, the first Native American to be the U.S. poet laureate. She was elected or chosen in 2019, and she was extended another year from this year to 2021. When the world as we knew it ended, by Joy Harjo. We were dreaming on an occupied island at the farthest edge of a trembling nation when it went down. Two towers rose up from the east coast of commerce and touched the sky. Men walked on the moon. Oil was sucked dry by two brothers. Then it went down. swallowed by a fire dragon, by oil and fear, eaten whole. It was coming. We had been watching since the eve of the missionaries in their long and solemn clothes to see what would happen. We saw it from the kitchen window over the sink as we made coffee, cooked rice, and potatoes, enough for an army. We saw it all as we changed diapers and fed the babies. We knew it through the branches of the knowledgeable tree, through the snags of stars, through the sun and storms from our knees as we bathed and washed the floors. The conference of the birds warned us as they flew over destroyers in the harbor, parked there since the first takeover. It was by their song and talk we knew when to rise, when to look out the window to the commotion going on, the magnetic field thrown off by grief. We heard it, the racket in every corner of the world as the hunger for war rose up in those who would steal to be president, to be king or emperor, to own the trees, stones, and everything else that moved about the earth, inside the earth and above it. We knew it was coming, tasted the winds who gathered intelligence from each leaf and flower, from every mountain, sea, and desert, from every prayer and song, all over this tiny universe, floating in the skies of infinite being. And then it was over. This world we had grown to love, for its sweet grasses, for the many-colored horses and fishes, for the shimmering possibilities while dreaming. But then there were the seeds to plant, and the babies who needed milk and comforting, and someone picked up a guitar or ukulele from the rubble and began to sing about the light flutter, the kick beneath the skin of the earth. We felt there beneath us a warm animal, a song being born between the legs of her, a poem. Well, and she sees things differently from all of us, being
Right.
a Native American.
Yeah.
And so God bless her. I mean, that's one thing that we see in poetry, and it's one thing we see here too. And all the diversity, the different viewpoints, and the different work we all do. And just as a quick utterance, if I may, is I want to thank you, Bob Beitcher, for you, and also to Jennifer Clymer, for your loving support of the creative, of all of the residents, I'm being one, here on the campus. Because even in the face of coronavirus, we've suffered. Personal lives have even suffered more. We've all suffered personally. And to keep that spark of life alive, because someone said a long time ago, poetry is praise and affirmation of life.
Yep. Thank you, Harry. And I think we've talked about this before in different contexts, but I think for both me and Jennifer and others, recognizing what was being taken away over these last 6 months, and feeling somewhat hopeless or helpless in terms of being able to do anything about that. We can't tell you, oh, go out and have a good time, get together, all those things. But what we needed to do was find, how do we make this time something very special and build something during this time that will flower in the future. And I think, this 1 hour that we get with you every week, Jen's entire program, other things we're doing are just great beginnings to, I think, things that we want to continue when, God willing, all of this craziness ends. So I know we're all very grateful to you, for bringing your love of poetry and your understanding of poetry and language to all of us and getting us so excited and enthusiastic.
Well, thank you, Bob. And, we get humbled, no matter what we know in any field, how many years we studied, we also find out there's so much we don't know.
Yes.
I'm always humbled. And now it's time, may I just say, it's a blessing to have the wonderful Jennifer Clymer, Director, MPTF Media, to sing on this occasion. Here's Jennifer. Are you with us, Jennifer?
I am.
Did you hear me?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take it away, Jennifer Clymer.
Where have all the flowers gone? Long time coming. Where have all the flowers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the flowers gone? Young girls pick them, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the young girls gone? Long time coming. Where have all the young girls gone? Long time ago. Where have all the young girls gone? Taken husbands, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the young men gone? Long time coming. Where have all the young men gone? Long time ago. Where have all the young men gone? Gone to soldier, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time coming. Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the soldiers gone? Gone to graveyards, everyone. When will we ever learn? When will we ever learn? Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time coming. Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time ago. Where have all the graveyards gone? Gone to flower, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the flowers gone? Long time coming. Where have all the flowers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the flowers gone? Young girls picked them, everyone. When will we ever learn? When will we ever learn?
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Jennifer. You have such a beautiful voice.
Harry, what a blessing for us to have that beautiful voice on our show, huh?
I agree, and it lifts us up. I mean, there's song lifting us up. So thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. Bob?
Yeah, Harry, so I want to take, again, just a moment here to frame what 9/11 means to us. In addition to the estimated 3,000 roughly people who lost their lives during the attacks themselves, there are tens of thousands of family members and friends who mourn the loss of their loved ones. There are tens of thousands of survivors in the buildings themselves, frontline workers, ordinary citizens who continue to suffer from PTSD, higher incidence rates of cancer, respiratory issues, and other ailments directly or indirectly attributable to the attacks. This war on terror that was defined by this day has killed hundreds of thousands, wounded many, many more, and left millions displaced. The Middle East and North Africa have become totally destabilized, leading to brutal civil wars and massive flows of migrants. Domestically, like it or not, our civil liberties have been scaled back with additional surveillance of any kind. Just think of what it was like getting on an airplane at an airport before and after 9/11. It wouldn't be difficult to defend the claim that 9/11 represents the single most significant political event in the post-Cold War era. This basic premise of all of this is that the United States was attacked by Al-Qaeda, and that civilized states have the right to defend themselves preemptively against terrorist barbarism in an age where terrorism is networked transnationally and more threatening than ever before, owing to new technologies of destruction. So it really reshaped our world in ways that I think we probably have lost track of over 19 years. Every time I go through an airport and have to take off my shoes and take off my belt and my watch, and I say, thank you, Osama bin Laden, for this, indignity that we're suffering for everything else that goes on. On the night of September 10th, 2001, my beloved wife, Carol, was on a red-eye, flying from Los Angeles to Philadelphia to help my aunt move from her apartment into independent living. So she was in the air and coming into Philadelphia when the towers went down. I woke up early in the morning, which is my usual custom, turned on the radio and heard about this going on. And for about a half an hour, I was frantic because who knew? We knew about two towers in New York. Who knew what was going on elsewhere? And then finally, at some point in the morning, my wife called, somewhat hysterical. The plane had landed in Philadelphia. They immediately took them off the plane. They had to leave their bags there. They walked into a completely empty airport, and no one said anything to them what was going on. The only thing they could see as they left the airport was they got flashes of television screens on. So they were kind of piecing together what had happened as they were walking down to go out of the airport. And she was in touch with me, and I was able to reassure our kids. But I still think about it today. But for the grace of God, Philadelphia would have been another interesting target for them, and so there's a personal part of 9/11 that I can't forget. I think maybe, Harry, we each have time for one more poem.
Yes, why don't you do one and then I'll do one.
Okay. This one I think is just a super powerful poem. It's by a Polish Nobel laureate, and I assume that this is a translation. His name is Wisława Szymborska, and I probably screwed that up somewhere along the way, and Wisława will have to forgive me. And it's called Photograph from September 11. And it's based on, I should say, a very famous photograph of 9/11 that captured people jumping out of the towers and captured them in midair. And that photograph is also the basis of a Dom DeLillo novel, and I think another novel as well. But here's the poem. They jumped from the burning floors. 1, 2, a few more, higher, lower. The photograph halted them in life and now keeps them above the earth, toward the earth. Each is still complete with a particular face and blood well hidden. There's enough time for hair to come loose, for keys and coins to fall from pockets. They're still within the air's reach, within the compass of places that have just now opened. I can only do 2 things for them: describe this flight and not add a last line.
Well read. I believe it's a female, Rizlawa.
Okay.
Just for the record, but yes, that brings up another question. I mean, sometimes I wonder, can a person write about an artifact? I mean, we all saw this, most of us on TV, and deeply as it's seared into our mind, can we ever even touch that visual? And then obviously, to go back to, your first person that you talked about, can we even touch, the magnitude of the, to use a mundane word, in this case, the horror of it all. We do what we're able to do, and, she did capture that, that photograph and caught what we saw, and we saw in photographs too, not only visually. So thank you, Bob, for that. Let me read this poem right here by Anne Lauterbach, Hum. The days are beautiful, the days are beautiful. I know what days are, the other is weather. I know what weather is, the days are beautiful. Things are incidental, someone is weeping. I weep for the incidental, the days are beautiful. Where is tomorrow? Everyone will weep. Tomorrow is yesterday, the days are beautiful. Tomorrow is yesterday, today is weather. The sound of the weather is everyone weeping. Everyone is incidental. Everyone weeps. The tears of today will put out tomorrow. The rain is ashes. The days are beautiful. The rain falls down. The sound is falling. The sky is a cloud. The days are beautiful. The sky is dust. The weather is yesterday. The weather is yesterday. The sound is weeping. What is this dust? The weather is nothing. The days are yesterday. The towers are yesterday. The towers are incidental. What are these ashes? Here is the hate that does not travel. Here is the robe that smells of the night. Here are the words retired to their books. Here are the stones loosed from their settings. Here is the bridge over the water. Here is a season dry in the fireplace. Here are the ashes. The days are beautiful.
Yeah, wonderful poem. Wonderful poem.
It also shows how you can take a mundane word and to lift it into life.
Right.
I remember years ago, I saw Galway Canal read a poem about a student of his who committed suicide, and he just took the word interesting, and he was speaking to her. Obviously, in her absence, he was saying things like, seconds are interesting, minutes are interesting, but sometimes through poetry, you can take some banal word and give it new life.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Bob, we have about 2 minutes left. Why don't you close us out with whatever it is you feel is important? I mean, everything you have said today is obviously extremely important. And I guess all I can do before I pass this to you is just say thank you for your idea of honoring 9/11 and all those people who you did a litany of, the different types who were affected by this. Bob Beitcher.
Thank you, Harry. And thank you for allowing me to join you on this show. And you did, Harry, some real deep digging to find some wonderful poetry about this period, about this moment. I guess I would end it by saying something that I know Harry will agree with, which is these events are, an event like 9/11 is stunning. It knocks us on our asses. Even those of us who didn't lose anyone feel the permeating grief of those who did, family members, young kids, parents, wives, sisters, brothers. And I think I share Harry's feeling that language, particularly in the form of poetry, whether you're writing it or listening to it, can be so transformational and can really play a powerful part in our overcoming our grief, getting perspective in some of these poems, appreciating the natural world around us, appreciating the fact that life goes on in the midst of all of this. And poetry just plays such an important role in our culture, in our society, in our spiritual and emotional lives, that we need to continue to embrace it and go to it at these moments when we're feeling down, or we need to be lifted up. We need companionship or perspective. That's what it's there for. It's other people sharing their thoughts, feelings, emotions in very powerful ways, and it's there for our taking. We are so blessed to have that rich meal to access.
Thank you, Bob Beitcher. Well said. And Jennifer Clymer, thank you very much once more. And if you're there, I will turn over to you. Otherwise, I'll just let Bob handle this right here. There's Jennifer. Jennifer, thank you very much. I love your singing as always. And thank you again. And that's it from this Villa 119. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Harry. We so appreciate it.